Hi, this is week two, problem three, and this is part one. Unfortunately, I did record a 25-minute lecture, but it wouldn't upload on the video yesterday because it was way too long. So I had to wait until today to record them in two different videos, so that way it would upload a video to YouTube easier. All right, so the T account practice, the very first question says invested cash in the business for $65,000. So we know cash and capital gets affected, and we debit cash for $65,000 and we credit capital for $65,000. The next question is purchase office equipment on account for $4,000. That means that office equipment is the very first account that gets affected, and accounts payable, since it's paying on account, that be for $4,000. So let's look at office equipment, and we credit office equipment for $4,000. That means that we a debit of office equipment, so that means that we credit accounts payable for $4,000. The next transaction is perform services for customers, meaning that revenue is getting affected. The second account is cash because he's receiving $5,000 in cash and $8,500 on account. So account receivables is the last transaction or the last account that gets affected. So obviously we know that revenue is getting affected. That's for 13,500, and then we know they're receiving $5,000 in cash and the rest on account. So account receivables $8,500, and we are done with that transaction. The next transaction is owner withdrew $1,000 for personal reasons. So drawing is affected and cash is affected, and that would be for $1,000. So we know that we credit $1,000 under cash and we debit drawing for $1,000, and we are done with that transaction. The next transaction is paid monthly telephone bill for $650. So we know cash is getting affected, and we know that phone expense is getting affected, or telephone expense, and it is for $650. So we credit cash for $650, and then we debit telephone expense for $650. The next transaction is perform services for customer $10,000 cash, where cash is getting affected and revenue is getting affected, and that would be for $10,000. So we debit $10,000 here, and then we credit $10,000 under revenue here. The next transaction is paid monthly rent for $2,500 cash. So that would be cash is getting affected and rent expense is getting affected, and that would be for $2,500. So then we credit $2,500 under cash, and then we look for rent expense. We debit $2,500 in cash. So we know our debits are equal to our credits. The next transaction is purchased prepaid insurance for $1,600. So we know cash is getting affected and prepaid insurance. They're both under assets. So then we for 1,600, so we credit $1,600 on cash, and then we also debit $1,600 under prepaid insurance. The next transaction is perform services for customers on account for $12,000. So we know account receivables is getting affected, and we know that revenue is getting affected, and that is for $12,000. So we credit $12,000 under revenue, and then we debit account receivables for $12,000. The next transaction is purchased office equipment on account for $8,250. So office equipment and accounts payable is the one that's get affected for. So it is $8,250 accounts under accounts payable, and then we go under office equipment, which is $8,250. Please make sure you stop the video if you have any questions. I'm trying to wrap it up so that way I can upload it to YouTube a lot easier. Owner withdrew $500 for personal reasons, so drawing is getting affected, and the other account is cash is getting affected, and it is for $500. So we credit cash for $500 here, and then we debit drawing for $500, and we are done with that transaction. The next transaction is perform services for customers for $7,500 on account. So account receivable is the one that is getting affected, and also account receivables and revenue. So then it is for $7,500. $7,500, and then we go down to account receivables and we do $7,500, and we are done with that transaction. The next transaction is paid utility bill for $1,600. So cash and utilities expense are the two accounts that are getting affected, and it is for $1,600. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight a couple of these so that way it gives us a little bit of room so we can enter our we can foot these transactions or these T accounts and balance them as well. So it is for purchased paid utility bill for $1,600. So we know we credit $1,600 here and we debit $1,600 under utilities expense. The next transaction is purchase supplies for cash. So cash is getting affected and supplies is getting affected for $3,000. So now we credit $3,000 under here, and then we look for supplies, and then we debit $3,000 here. The next transaction or the last transaction is customer paid $5,000 on balance from transaction L. So cash is getting affected and accounts payable is getting affected. And then we have $5,000 that they are paying on the amount that they owed, and we take $5,000 away here since they paid with cash. All right, so now we are done with all of the transactions. Let's foot the balance, which is the sum of all of these, and then the sum of all of these, and then the balance would be under assets is your debits minus your credits. So your balance is $64,150. And then for account receivables, it is, and then it would be 0 on this side. So technically, your balance is $28,000. All right, and then the supplies would be $3,000. 0 over here, so your balance is $3,000. And then for prepaid insurance is $1,600 here, 0 here, $1,600 here. And then office equipment would be the sum of these, and then nothing was depreciated, so your balance is this. So we have our assets, and then we have our accounts payable, which is over here, which is how much we have loaned out during this, and then this would be 0. So your, well, never mind. See, the mistake I made is this would be 5,000 that we paid off. So technically, how much we owe would be equal to your credit minus your debits, which is 7,250. And then we have capital, which is $65,000, and then we have our service revenues, which is the sum of this. We haven't had any returns, so technically your revenue would be this. And then utilities expense would be $1,600. So your revenue would be $1,600. And your drawing would be this. So your and then rent expense balance is $2,500, and the telephone expense would be the same. There were no mistakes that were made, so your balance for the telephone expense is $650. I thought there were two. Let me see. I think there probably was in another example. Anyways, let's do assets. Let's actually equalize our equation. Owner's equity. All right, the assets is equal to the sum of all these yellow lines, this, and we have this, And then we have this. And we have this. We have one more. We have the cash. And close parentheses. So that would be 109,000. Our liabilities is equal to, it's all the way up here, 7,250. And then our owner's equity is your capital plus your revenue, your capital, your revenue, minus the sum of all of your expenses, which be the drawing, your utilities expense, the rent expense, and telephone expense. And close the parentheses. You have 101,750. So we have 109,000 for assets, and then liabilities plus owner's equity is basically the sum of these two, and we have 109 equal to 109, which is the correct answer.